What is up, everybody? It's Animac here for AnimeUproar, and online discussions about Attack on Titan are full of debates about who the real villain is in this story. Is it Eren? Is it Zeke? Is it the Marleyans? Is it the Eldians? Is it the Jaegerists? Is it Karl Fritz? Is it everyone at the same time? And so on. I find that, just like in the real world, in Attack on Titan, your opinion on who the true villain is usually depends on your own perspective. That said, I don't often see much discussion about the fact that Ymir Fritz, the progenitor of the Titans, is actually an extremely messed up villain when you really think about it. This is probably because Ymir's backstory clearly showcases the fact that she was a victim of violence and abuse, and that is absolutely true. However, despite starting out as a victim, Ymir's own choices and actions eventually turned her into a horrifying villain, and that is what we need to talk about in this video. If you guys enjoy our Attack on Titan content and you want to see more in the future, just leave a quick like and comment. It only takes a second, but it helps with that YouTube algorithm. Just a quick reminder that subscribing and hitting that bell is a completely free and also very real way of directly supporting the channel. Finally, this video will contain Attack on Titan manga spoilers, so please proceed with caution. You have been warned. Alright, so let's talk about Ymir's tragic backstory and how she came to be the legendary progenitor. About 1,820 years before the beginning of the main Attack on Titan story, Ymir was a normal human girl whose village was attacked by ancient Eldian soldiers. Ymir's parents were killed, and she herself, along with many of her people, were captured and enslaved by the ruthless King Fritz of Eldia. They suffered many cruelties at the hands of the Eldian soldiers, including having their tongues cut out. One day, someone opened the gate to a pig pen, which enabled some pigs to escape. Ymir was blamed for letting the pigs loose, and to be fair, she was actually the one who did it, as we learn in chapter 135 of the manga. Ymir likely did this because she herself felt just as imprisoned as those pigs were, and so if she couldn't escape, then she could at least give the pigs a chance at freedom. Ymir's punishment for this act of defiance was to be hunted for sport by the Eldian soldiers. As she ran for her life from the cruel soldiers, an injured Ymir came across an unusually massive tree. There was an opening at the bottom of the tree, and Ymir tried to hide inside it, but when she entered the opening, she fell into some type of sinkhole filled with liquid. Just when it looked like Ymir was about to drown alone in the darkness, a strange spine-like creature that resembles a hallucigenia approached Ymir and then attached itself to her spine. In the next moment, Ymir and that strange creature somehow fused, and as soon as this occurred, Ymir transformed into the very first Titan. Her Titan form was absolutely gigantic, and it easily dwarfed even the colossal Titans. This was the very first Titan, and this Titan embodied all 9 Titan shifter powers that we know today within a single person, Ymir. When he saw this incredible power, the King of Eldia changed his mind about killing Ymir. Instead of killing her, he made her one of his wives and used her to expand the Eldian Empire. That is how Ymir the slave became Ymir Fritz. Ymir went along with all of this, and she served the king loyally despite his cruelty. Thanks to Ymir's Titan form, the Eldians were able to annihilate their enemies, including the ancient Marleyans, and they were also able to build the kind of large-scale infrastructure that the other nations could only dream of, including massive bridges across mountains, huge roads, and other concrete structures. And so, thanks to the power of Ymir's Titan, the Eldian Empire became the dominant power on the continent. Eventually, Ymir and King Fritz would have 3 daughters together, Maria, Rose, and Sheena. The 3 walls on the island of Paradise were named after these daughters. 13 years after receiving the power of the Titans, Ymir died protecting the Eldian king. When an assassin attempted to kill the king with a spear, Ymir in her human form jumped out in front of him and was killed. Presumably, the spear pierced her heart and killed her before she could use her Titan powers to regenerate. After the death of Ymir, King Fritz ordered their 3 daughters to eat the remains of their mother in order to inherit the power of the Titans. This absolutely insane plan actually worked, and it was repeated multiple times in the coming generations until the power of the Titans was eventually split into 9 distinct Titan shifters. Since Ymir died 13 years after gaining the power of the Titans, every subsequent Titan shifter also inherited this curse of Ymir, and each one of them died 13 years after becoming a Titan shifter. But although she died physically, after her death, some aspect of Ymir's consciousness was transported to the mysterious land of the Paths. And there, she continued to serve the Eldian royal bloodline by mindlessly and tirelessly creating Titans for her descendants. Even in death, Ymir continued to be a slave of the Fritz royal family, and the founding Titan would faithfully obey any member of the royal bloodline who gained possession of it. Ymir's nearly 2,000-year-old enslavement was finally broken when Eren entered the world of the Paths and convinced her to help him destroy the world. But now we need to go back and actually look at the life choices that Ymir made and the actions she had taken since becoming a Titan shifter. There is certainly nothing controversial about her actions before she became a Titan. She was oppressed and enslaved by the Eldians from a very young age, and she just did what she had to do to survive. Her decision to free the pigs was one of the few decisions that she made of her own will, since almost every other decision in her life was forced upon her by her oppressors. And of course, as symbolic as this decision to free the pigs was, Ymir nearly paid for it with her life. However, once Ymir gains the power of the Titans, we have to start looking at her in a different way. Even though up to that point she was clearly a victim of the Eldians, once she gains the ability to become a giant Titan, she is no longer just a victim. Even if we assume that Ymir's first few Titan transformations might have been hazy and she may not have been fully in control, we know that eventually she did gain excellent control of her Titan form because she was able to use her Titan to build bridges, roads, and other structures. These are complex projects that required Ymir to have a precise control of her Titan form. So even though she started out as a slave, after gaining the ability to become a Titan, Ymir was no longer at the mercy of her Eldian captors. She could have used her Titan power to crush her captors if she had wanted to, or if she didn't want to spill any blood, she could have just used her giant Titan to escape from the Eldians. The ancient Eldians of that era didn't possess any sort of weapon that would stand a chance against Ymir's Titan form. And since at this point Ymir had all 9 Titan shifter powers inside of her, there were no other Titans who could challenge her. As far as physical power was concerned, the Eldians were now at the mercy of Ymir, not the other way around. And yet, Ymir decided to stay with the Eldians to become King Fritz's wife and to use her Titan form to destroy the enemies of Eldia. This means that she committed horrible acts and killed countless people in order to expand and maintain the Eldian Empire. Among the countless people that she killed were enemy soldiers, but some of the victims were certainly just innocent civilians who had nothing to do with the war. Some of her victims were almost certainly just helpless villagers who didn't do anything wrong, just like she herself was when the Eldians attacked her village. And yet, she still went along with all of this. Not only that, but as I mentioned earlier, Ymir would eventually sacrifice her own life in order to protect King Fritz from an assassination attempt. The king would thank her for her sacrifice by forcing her 3 daughters to consume parts of her in order to inherit the power of the Titans. When I first saw Ymir's backstory, I speculated that maybe she gave up her life for the king because she had lost the will to live. And so the assassination attempt was only an excuse for her to end her life by willingly taking on a serious injury and then refusing to regenerate. But that is not what happened, as we find out later. At the very end of the manga, it is confirmed that Ymir's loyalty to the Eldians and to King Fritz in particular came from the fact that she was in love with him. Apparently, she fell in love with her own abuser, and she loved the family that they had built together. So she committed horrible acts in her Titan form, killed countless people, and finally sacrificed her own life because she loved a cruel, sadistic, and abusive scumbag like King Fritz. When this was revealed at the end of the story, I was not super happy about it, and I even criticized Ymir as a character. I mean, yeah, in real life, this kind of stuff does happen. Unfortunately, victims can fall in love with their own abusers and then go on to enable and protect these people because of some warped belief that their love will prevail in the end. But even though this is not an unrealistic scenario, I still felt that Ymir's character should have been explored more fully, and that her motivations should have been something other than just a love for a guy who absolutely did not deserve any love from literally anyone. Frankly, I felt that Ymir was not as well written of a character as she could have been because her true motivations were so counterintuitive and unrelatable. Sometime later though, I realized that Ymir was a poorly written character only if we look at her as a helpless victim who was just being manipulated by King Fritz and the Eldians. And I mean, yes, she was being manipulated, and even after she became a Titan and the Eldians could no longer match her physical power, I'm sure they were still manipulating her psychologically and emotionally. But still, even though Stockholm Syndrome is a thing, nothing can excuse Ymir's choices and actions after she gained the power of the Titans. Ymir was just a young girl when she was first enslaved by the Eldians, but we know that she lived for 13 years after becoming a Titan. That means that she did reach adulthood and was likely in her 20s when she died. And yet, even as a fully functioning adult, Ymir continued to serve her captors and commit atrocities on their behalf. As an adult who had the means to extract herself from this situation and yet chose not to, Ymir must be considered personally responsible for these acts. King Fritz wasn't inside the Titan with her, he wasn't holding her at knife point and forcing her to destroy his enemies. She could have used her Titan to take him and his men out, or at least to get away from them, but she didn't. Instead, she chose to kill countless people in the name of Eldian imperial expansion. The cruelty and manipulative nature of King Fritz is certainly an important factor to consider in all of this, but that still doesn't justify Ymir's actions. The same is true of Ymir's tragic and traumatic life experiences. Trauma from the past certainly has a profound effect on people, and it can cause them a lot of pain and distress. But at the same time, past trauma does not give us justification to hurt other people. Being a victim does not excuse becoming a victimizer. In short, being in love with someone is not an excuse for hurting innocent people, a traumatic past is not an excuse for hurting innocent people, and a manipulative spouse is not an excuse for hurting innocent people. At the end of the day, Ymir Fritz is certainly a victim in many ways, but she is not just a victim. She is also a villain. As I mentioned earlier, when I first read the ending of Attack on Titan, the one that included the extra pages, I thought that Ymir Fritz was a poorly written character because I kept thinking of her as just a helpless victim and someone whom I was supposed to sympathize and empathize with. I only realized later that she is not a helpless victim. She stopped being helpless the moment she gained the ability to turn into a gigantic monster at will. And she stopped being a victim the moment she consciously chose to use her Titan power to kill other people on behalf of King Fritz. Ymir is a victim who made the choice to become a villain, even though there are mitigating factors that we have to keep in mind, including her tragic past and the emotional and psychological pressures that she faced from King Fritz. But still, these mitigating factors do not absolve Ymir of her guilt. After all, we know that Ymir wasn't just completely brainwashed into thinking that what the Eldians were doing was justified. Don't forget that she willingly decided to break the rules that the Eldians had imposed on her by releasing those pigs. If she had been brainwashed, she would have just accepted all of the rules without question. But Ymir released the pigs because she knew that what the Eldians were doing was wrong, and releasing the pigs was her own symbolic form of protest. It was a symbolic statement about how she and the other enslaved people were being treated by their captors. And yet, even though she clearly knew that what the Eldians were doing to other people was wrong, she chose to support and enable them because she loved King Fritz. She even left her own children at King Fritz's mercy because she chose to die protecting him, and we all know how that turned out. Then, after waiting for nearly 2,000 years for Eren to liberate her from her servitude inside the Paths, Ymir willingly supported and enabled Eren's plan to destroy the world, killing the vast majority of the world's population in the process. Eren told her that they should destroy this cruel world in order to attain true freedom, and again, she had no issue with ending countless innocent lives in order to get what she personally wanted. We know that she watched all of these innocent people die during the rumbling, and yet she didn't really seem to have a huge problem with it. At the end of the day, she doesn't seem to value human life any more than King Fritz himself did. So if Eren is a villain, and many people have argued that he is, then Ymir is certainly one as well. In the end, Ymir stops the rumbling after seeing Mikasa killing Eren despite being in love with him. This act shows Ymir that, just like Mikasa, she too can break out of the living nightmare that was her love for King Fritz. But while I can appreciate the fact that Ymir's life was, in many ways, a living nightmare, did she really need to see Mikasa killing Eren to realize that King Fritz was a bad person and that killing millions of innocent people on his behalf was a bad thing? no, she did not need Mikasa to come to this conclusion. She knew the truth a long time ago, and that is why she decided to free those pigs. But instead of sticking to the principles she held even before becoming a Titan, the Titan Ymir chose to support a villain, and thus she chose to become a villain herself. The story of Ymir Fritz is not the story of a victim who had no agency in her life and who was just being manipulated by everyone. Rather, it is the story of a victim who willingly chose to become a villain, and that is the most tragic aspect of this entire tale. Ymir was a victim of abuse who decided to join the ranks of her own abusers and wreak havoc upon the world, killing millions of innocent people in the process. And so, rather than being a poorly written victim character as I initially thought she was, she is actually a pretty well written and pretty effed up villain character. What do you guys think of Ymir Fritz as a character? And do you agree with my assessment that she was actually one of the most messed up villains in Attack on Titan? Don't forget to leave your feedback down in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like it in the future, just leave a quick like. It only takes a second, but it helps with that YouTube algorithm. And if you're new to AnimeUproar, or maybe you've been watching our videos but you just haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, remember that subscribing and hitting that notification bell is a very real and very important way of directly supporting this channel. You can also hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at AnimeUproar. I want to give a big thank you to all of our AnimeUproar patrons for making videos like this one possible. Special thank you to Kyle Salisbury. This man is an absolute mad lad and a disciple of Lord 𝔽 himself. And I can't forget all of our The One tier patrons, the ones who rise above all other clans, including Alpha Sigma, Ingrata, Aljatal, Pate Hefa, the Red-Haired Fox, Hinokami and Water, the Toasted Chi, Corey McGowan, Spidey Leftanel, Tungsten Tarkus, Big Buddhist, and Jeremy Cummings. Finally, thank you also to our Pro Hero tier patrons, including the one and only Gilgamesh, Steelers, Angel Cruz, Alicia Octor, Bonnie Parks, Joanne Garcia, Fatboy Games, Kaido Might Be a Duck, Jessica Rabbit, Jeremy Phillips, and Olivania. If you enjoy our videos and you feel that they provide value for you, consider supporting us on Patreon. Even a single $1 will give you access to our patron exclusive Discord, and your name will appear in our videos, along with these amazing people. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys.